Welcome. You're listening to InDepth Talks, Design Enquiry, a segment to celebrate blooming artists and bold practices that are turning the art and design scene on its head. Today we're in conversation with Aditya Mandlik, a graduate of the Institute of Advanced Architecture in Catalonia. With an experimental approach to design, he founded Studio Aditya Mandlik, a Mumbai based design firm deliberating on sustainable futures through an international practice in symbiogenic architecture, urban and interior design.
We start with the first question always, where it involves your childhood in it, and
Okay.
where you grew up, and how was your graduation like, and how did you being in Rachana Sansad contribute to where you are right now? If you could expand on that.
Hmm. Man, I think I don't know, man. I've never thought of all of these things. So let's think about it together.
Yeah.
One one would be I was brought up in Bombay. All I mean, since I was born, I think I'm here. But I think what is really I think more than Rachna or whatever my schooling was that I think the ability to understand someone just because of their language is something that I've noticed a lot of times, right? So the place for me, place is that. So for me to understand someone is the place that I understand, right? So if I was born somewhere, I know that place only because I understand the language. So the communication methods end up coming from there. Then say for me in terms of birth, so I was born to two artist parents. Both of my parents paint. They create for a living. Um, as I think so in school, I was a horrible kid who who hated, I think, studying as an entire practice as a whole, but really enjoyed maths. Yeah, until I mean, I remember this distinctly because I remember my mom being extremely worried about me in life. That what the hell is he going to do if he lands up like this? So yeah, I mean that was me up in but then up until I think somewhere around like eighth or the ninth grade, and I remember discovering this one subject just as a part of the school was technical drawing. Yeah, and I have no idea why. I used, I was, it was there for like 2 years, if I'm not wrong, or two semesters. First part of it, I was horrible at it. Yeah. But then I started understanding how to make it. Yeah. How to draw it. And my parents never taught me drawing. Yeah. Even though they're artists, they've been like, तू कर ले तेरे हिसाब से है ना, हमको डिस्टर्ब मत कर तू तू तेरा देख. So, I mean, obviously, they would tell me, ki, you sharpen the pencil like this and like, those smaller nuances. But technical drawing, I think for me was one of those subjects other than mathematics, which I loved, right? And I landed up really enjoy. I landed up really enjoying the process of making a mechanical drawing of some part. And interestingly, through so I was having this conversation, like I was showing my portfolio. I used to be done with my portfolios like quite early. I remember they used to be like A2 size portfolios, and I'd finished everything, and I was doing my friend's portfolio just because I was bored, and I didn't want to study other subjects. Is when one of my professor, like the professor who was teaching us, caught me, and he started discussing, and then I was like, I'm just enjoying it, so I'm doing it, right? And then the conversation went ahead, and I think this was the 10th grade, and somehow I started telling him that it'll be so interesting if I place a human here, and it was like an aperture in a mechanical part. And I think that is the only conversation. I mean, I was shouted at, if I'm not wrong, but I don't remember the shouting, right? I mean, I was shouted at for doing someone else's work, right? But I don't remember that. But I remember him saying that you should then do architecture. And after that, I mean, 11th grade, 12th grade, before the degree. So I mean, but that somehow stuck with me, right? And I think the somehow I always thought it was extremely powerful to curate a space, right? Because I think that is just like a natural gesture for me. Like the minute I would enter a space, I'll first make it my own. So the ownership of defining and curating the space was what I was. So then what to do after 11th and 12th is when I mean, my parents were of an opinion that okay, you know what, you can start applying at like different colleges just to see. But I think I I hated studying so much that I calculated exact amount of marks I need to get into a certain college, a certain I don't know if CET still exists, but there was MHCET, Architecture CET, there was NATA, and there was AIEEE. And I was told, so both of my parents are from JJ, right? They're JJ. No, sorry, what am I saying? Sorry, my dad is from JJ. My mom is from a music school. Okay, who lands up painting now. But he's a JJ product. So I had an idea of what JJ environment and culture was. And for me, I always thought that Rachna was a better school. Okay, I'm very sorry for saying this, but yeah, I always thought of it. Primarily only understanding it from from various point of views, right? Let's not even jump into it. But JJ lands up being an attraction for students who are not from the city. Usually, like that is my observation. Yeah. So anyway, so I knew that I had to get into either of the two colleges. One was Kamla Raheja, or other one is JJ. Oh, sorry, Rachna Sansad. Um, so I mean Kamla, for which I needed Nata. I was like, this is too much effort. Yeah. And Rachna had a government aided fee structure. I was like, listen, if I save money, I'm gonna use it somewhere else. So so I prepared myself only through the mechanism of um, achieving exact number of marks to just get into Rajna. So I remember I had applied only to one college at the end of the day, which was academy, and that too aided. And I think that is what I landed up in, luckily, with all the scare that I had during the process of it. And yeah, that was my entrance to academy. So I also remember why not Krivya and why Academy. Yeah, and it still exists. The difference was that when I entered, I mean, I have such bullshit reasons of knocking something down. No, I entered Academy. I still remember there were nice creepers around at the entrance when I entered. Near the elevator, there were nice paintings. There were a lot of installations. One I still remember was made out of tube lights and stuff. And I thought this is so much creativity. It's so much more fun, right? I entered Krivya. Krivya had a boring passage. To me only climb up the stairs to reach Krivya and get some understanding of okay, architecture was happening. So on the face value of it, um, I thought Rachna was a cooler college, right? I mean, that was it, and that is how I focused on Rachna. So yeah, I mean, I mean, yeah, that is
I love
that
how
is
you made that decision, you know. I love how your brain works generally. It shows up. I mean,
when I mean I mean, say if I mean, you for me, I think uh, everything has to be perceived as well, right? If the perceptual value is low, I'm not going to read into it.
yeah, that is true. So the
So if
accountability
you
also.
don't judge a book by its cover, then something's wrong with you because someone spent a lot of effort designing the book cover for you to pick it up from the shelf.
Yeah, that is true.
So I judge the book by its cover
Okay, one
primarily.
question. It has always struck me that people, when they say that they want to enter architecture or architecture school, the perception of what architecture is from outside changes a lot when they are actually in the school. And it also further changes when you're into practice, right? But that is a further conversation. But how did this transition happen from you liking technical drawings, you liking the power that came with curation of space, to you actually being in the school? Like, did it change?
I'll tell you something. I don't know if it changed, yeah, because right before my fascination for architecture, right? I mean, infatuation, honestly, not even fascination, right? I've had met an architect who just come back from UK, recently married, recently setting up his office, um, and he was showing me some of his buildings, yeah. And I think, like, I thought it was so cool. It was so cool to, so cool to have designed a crematorium, to have designed this high-rise tower with his office. And back then, I did not know Zaha, or I did not know any of these guys. And he did not work at Zaha's office, but the built had those curves, which possibly must be a knockoff of some Zaha-esque project, right? Yeah, but I think it really caught me. And as far as I remember, I think it was his project of the crematorium, which back then I was not even fascinated by the forms. I was just fascinated by the story that he told me about it. So in my head, architecture was only about design, right? It was never about making something good enough for it to stand. Right? And it was just about okay, chalo, this space needs to feel like this, and then that, and then the light needs to be like this, and stuff like that. So also simultaneously, yeah, something else had happened was that my dad was doing a movie with uh, with the director, and the script had come at home, yeah. So when the script had come, I mean, obviously it's a film, it's a Bollywood film. I'm going nuts in my head, right? And I'm what, in 11th grade or like something like that, 10th 11th grade, I don't even remember. What I was fascinated with the scripts was that at every paragraph, no, they'll say that okay, lighting needs to be from this point of view, camera needs to be this, and there were those instructions around it, and that was extremely fascinating because that was somehow creating the moods and that was creating the scene, right? And when the crematorium project was explained to me, it must be his project. I don't even remember, very frankly, but he was explaining those things, those aspects, and I think that is what caught me. That is what inspired me to. So in fact, when I entered, there was this orientation program in the first year, right, which back then I think was for some duration, and we were asked to, like, I still remember, and both of the mentors back then are great friends now. Um, they they were trying to introduce to us the idea of systems within the city, right? So each of the groups had to map a system. That was my first architectural introduction. So as we were given topics in our and I remember my group was given Dabbawalas as a system to read. So one side film has happened for my dad. So I want to make a film. Yeah. So how to make a film? There was an old Handycam, Sony Handycam that was lying in my. I don't even know if y'all are from Handycam generation, but there was a Sony Handycam. Picked it up. I loved cameras since even before. Um, and then how to edit it. So my parents had bought me a new laptop just because finally this idiot who could not do well in school has managed to get into the college that he wanted to for architecture. So they are very happy. Yeah, so they bought me this new Mac, and I'm excited about it, right? So what do I explore on the Mac? iMovies, because who cares about AutoCAD, right? I can't install AutoCAD on Mac. Who cares? Who knows? So yeah, iMovie. I'm starting to learn. YouTube was a thing. So yeah, learning my way out of that iMovie software took made that one movie uh, was a shit movie, but yet I think was not something. So was not something that the entire group of people had imagined, right? Because a first year student making a movie for the first presentation is was impossible to be even imagined, right? I mean, and this is when 2012 you're making I mean, YouTube had started somewhere then, no? And like a few years before, and the only people who were doing it were actual enthusiasts about it. I wasn't an enthusiast. I was just a fiddler, no, like just like playing around, trying to like pretty much like this kabada khana guy who's like just picking some stuff. So I'm picking like different sources knowledge and like just trying to combine something. And then we just shot like a life of the dabba wala guy, no? So I remember going to his house at like 4 a.m. in the morning to see him poop, use the washroom in the public toilet, troubling him and his wife in his small house, walking down the streets, understanding the systems of code, which exists within the networks, and I think that was architecture for me. That landed up being an introduction to architecture. Building a building was only when they taught us to, right? Only when they're like, okay, chalo, building construction is a subject. You need to think about it and things like that. So this is how I was somehow like shaped, organized, or wired to land up being in architecture. So yeah, this
So,
is
did
what it
you
was.
did you enjoy that 5 year curriculum? I mean, you had your own efforts of molding it according to what you wanted it to be. Through the filmmaking, it is incredible, because in JJ particularly, it is so structured in a way, architecture I'm saying, that you don't have a lot of outlets to go and creatively explore different things. And
Hmm.
unless you experience that kind of connection and that kind of making, that kind of empathy through different design directions, you can't really get different perspectives into architecture, right? So in JJ particularly, from last so many years, the architects that are churning out are very unidirectional. They are not
A
very,
very unique
they are very unidirectional. They are not very experimental.
unidirection.
Yeah. And
Huh.
this your exercise of molding the curriculum a little bit according to your own thing shows up in your work as well. That is really fascinating, right?
Oh,
So, what
interesting.
is what is your perception or rather opinion about the curriculum and like what should be done about it? Do you think it's in the right direction?
Okay, I think as far as I read, I think first will be if I enjoyed 5 years, and then what could be edited. So, okay, if I were to put it, I think when I was doing architecture, I loved it. Yeah, I wasn't great at it, but I'll tell you what happened. Naturally, just because just because of my parents, my dad had asked me, just go and sketch. You should sketch, right? You, sh- I mean, regardless of whatever you sketch, right? And I was that guy who would make like broken lines, on paper because he's scared of what he's making, and like who's scared about making a drawing on a piece of paper, except for copying some manga, Dragon Ball Z characters. That is all that I'd done up until then. Um, so like I had overcome that fear of drawing on paper. Yeah, and I think it takes a lot of courage to do so, to be able to just be bold and draw. So because of that exact same thing, I landed up being good at sketching in my first year, before my first year, right? And that was appreciated by my peers. So they motivated me to be more nerdy at the end of the day. And them appreciating me actually instigated me to be better, to be very honest, right? So, and I mean, I just wanted to do some, I mean, to be very honest, there, I think at every point, there would be a certain sort of um, demands as a judo or as an exercise, right? The idea was always, I mean, I would get bored with those staggering exercises as architectural design, through architectural design exercise, right? So I had also started doing competitions with in my first year, even before um, I knew how to use a computer for drawings or for creating any sort of architecture. And I still remember asking Neha, who was the first mentor, who can I participate? But I don't know how these presentations and all are made. I still remember that conversation in the staff room, and she's like, "You do something, you send, you see what happens. Maximum what will happen? They'll not select you." I was like, "Okay, fine." But I think I did not do it, or something, and then I joined a group of seniors who were doing competitions as a way to learn what it is. But anyway, more or less, I think the idea was that that part, a competition brief would instigate my brain more than a boring brief that the school would give, right? And all I wanted to do was design, like any other guy, boring brain, wanted to do design. So I would be great at doing architecture design, I'll be good at doing competitions, but I'll be horrible with when it would come to like theory of structures. Now suddenly math and physics is something I should enjoy, but I didn't care about it once I started designing. um, but that was only something, uh, I mean, I feel old while I'm talking about all of this, but I think
No,
that was
actually,
only.
that is quite relevant.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But I think just because of the competitions and this, I think I enjoyed my 5 years. I thoroughly enjoyed. I did not learn for 4 years in 5 years. My architecture understanding of what architecture is was not shaped in 4 years. It was shaped only in 1 year, which was the fifth year. Fifth year only because of I chose. I mean, we were assigned a few mentors. Somehow, I wanted a certain mentor, yeah, for myself, who was who was a who was a principal of our school. Mm, so I was a rebel. So then I would go rebel in such a silent and a soft way. I would go and sit outside his office for like 3 hours, for 2 hours, and then he would see me waiting. But he would have so many meetings lined up, right? Because he's a busy man, obviously. But he would see me seated, and then one day he asked me,
I'm
"What
sorry.
what is it?"
Who was your
Yeah.
principal back then?
Rohit Shinkre.
Acha, Rohit Singh. Okay, because Mr. Rajiv Mishra was also uh, go there, right? Before he's our principal now. So he originally was,
Acha,
yeah, yeah. Anyways,
acha.
go.
No, I had no. I mean, I don't think Rajiv Mishra
Yeah,
was a principal during
yeah.
my
He must be
education.
before that then.
Yeah, yeah, possible, possible.
Yeah.
But so Shankar, so I mean, he did not know me. I was I had only known of the student projects that have been mentored with him, right? So I would sit like countless hours, no? Like I remember sitting for like countless hours just outside his office for him to come see my work and like, uh, I mean, give me any sort of grades. And that is what my thesis was. And that year is literally with all the readings, with everything, literally started shaping not what I knew about architecture, but how I could construct thought in my head. Maybe it's completely wrong, yeah. So, but I started formulating it for myself on how to think and how to construct an argument or how to construct a position of in a debate or I mean any of these things, right? But and that is what I think was. I mean, I mean that is when I thought like, okay, chalo architecture करके कुछ फायदा हुआ, because that was the year. But yeah, that is. But I think in retrospection, if the curriculum needs to be changed, I don't know. I am not one of those guys who can comment on the fact if the curriculum needs to be changed. What should the curriculum be? What should the alterations be? But I know one thing for sure is that throughout within architecture school we teach students on how to design a building. We we ask them to follow new forts. We ask them to follow all those regulations like DCR and whatever GRIA, whatever. But we don't teach them how to think. We only teach them how to follow. So the ability to construct thought on why something is or evaluate, say, okay, five things are possible directions that you can take, right? For any sort of a design choice, or it could be a practical choice in your own life. How do you evaluate between five options which all have potential but at different rates? They are variables. How do you make a choice? And then when someone can make a choice, that itself is a design process, right? So design process is not how beautiful you design a building. Uh, every design process is just a set of choices that you make, and the organization of those choices lands up being how you express, and your expression is your design. So yeah, I think I don't know if the curriculum needs to be changed, but I think the way to think needs to be taught.
Did
Yeah.
that happen in Catalonia during your post graduation? The emphasis on how to think.
No, I'll I no I mean um IAC is a great school, but I think, see, understand, education usually ensures that you are great at your skill, yeah. Then I mean sometimes education also aids you, like say at least professional education, right? Like say that of arts, music, literary backgrounds, or even architecture is where you will have a lot of literature that will somehow organize your values, your understanding about the field, and so on and so forth. But primarily, as a school, any school is designed to make you skillful, yeah. But the way to think is actually is the most important skill. So the way you organize a thought is the most important skill uh, today, because no longer skills will be important. right? We might not require a great hand drafted sheet anymore, right? I mean, that was a skill, but no longer would we require um, to be able to develop a grasshopper code, because I think even that will be taken care of. But the ability to think what you can do with the potential of a certain software is something that's missing everywhere. So you'll see great architecture, great looking buildings that is horrible architecture, right? So it architecture is beyond the idea of building something. So if you, but it is also that, right? The reason I say it's beyond, because if I were just to build, I have a limited goal, right? I have a point A to point B. So that is my streamlining thought. But I think when you're doing architecture, you're not just doing that. What you're doing is you're trying to achieve point A to point B, but towards achieving point B, you're surrounding it with all the possible ways in which you can approach point B. And maybe the straight line is not the best line, as the Pythagoras theorem would otherwise say. But maybe the best way is to take a nice 90-degree or whatever turn around it, and that degree of turn is evaluated only based on understanding the situation. So understanding the situation, understanding the place, is what architecture ends up being, is my understanding, and that is
Okay, one
what I
uh,
come from.
question. Looking at thought processes in general, it's subjective to a lot of personal experiences. As you rightly said, like
Huh.
there are thousand different things that surround a single point, and the influences that can have towards one's perception of the thought process is very different, right? But
Definitely.
at the end of the day, there is good architecture and there is bad architecture, right? There is something, a good solution to a problem, and there is a bad solution to problem. So what is the overarching set of uh, rules or set of constraints that you could define, which forms a good thought process? Because if we go into it deep, there are thousand different types of thought processes one can approach to, right? But of course, there are got to be some rules, or there are got to be some theme that one should be following. I mean, it has always been a process of confusion for me as well, getting into this question, because there is no direct answer to it. And looking at good or bad or extremes, we can't really, define on a personal level. There's always this gray that comes in between. So, how do you define that?
See, again, as you rightly ended it with, right? There's always those grays that you come with. So there's, see, good architecture. One is, okay, chalo. If you're doing a house, yeah, one, whoever you're designing it for should like it, should just enjoy the thing. Yeah, that is your primary baseline. Why is that important? That is important because if they like it, the place will stay. Okay, somehow that just takes care of your sustainability aspects and in terms of longevity. Yeah. So say you were in JJ, right? So you know Horniman Circle, right? Horniman Circle has seen more time on this planet than us combined. Yeah. And it has only seen it because it is appreciated till date. It is appreciated. It has seen waves of power change, come, go, and that has only happened because at every step of decision making, it was assumed to be relevant in some capacity. Okay, good or bad is not black and white. It's always a set of grays. Yeah, but there are a lot of smaller blacks in step, or smaller set of whites in the process of something looking gray, right? So okay, I can see Darpan's DP. right? It is a gray, black and like a grayscale photograph. If I were to just zoom down to one pixel, it'll either be white or it'll be black. Yeah, but it'll be a lot of different, like number of blacks in a certain portion. When zoomed out, will become a bit gray when I zoom out, right? So say that brick wall or whatever the laterite stone wall will just be that. So the resolution at which you see something is either black and white or uh, it's gray when I zoom out, right? So it's the resolution of the dialogue. So good architecture, one on surface level, can look shit, but when I read architecture, and only architecture can be read, not a constructed building only, right? I mean, if it's just like constructed, there's nothing to read. It's a black or it's a white. It's an absolute. But architecture can be read because it's understood and it's responded upon. So there'll be a lot of understandings, which is assimilations of a lot of blacks and a lot of absolutes, and then the architecture itself becomes gray. I don't know what I'm talking. Anyway,
No, that's a
all
crazy example to give, like that, just that image being a composition of a lot of whites and blacks just blew my mind. Because as an image, you can judge, right, if it is a good image or not.
yeah,
So as a
yeah,
whole, there is a lot of blacks and whites involved, and the process itself defines what the image becomes to be. And
yeah.
every black and white is basically boiling down a decision made, if
Hmm.
you look at it that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is literally
Yeah.
a decision that's made.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what really, changes is that, say, if you, again, good in a certain era, right? Okay, chalo. Building a steel and a concrete building would be perfectly normal 60 years before in the past. Yeah, perfectly normal. Exploring the intensities with which we can challenge a steel column, right, in its structure, in its, those were the explorations that we were dealing with as architecture, as a community. Today, our perception of what is ecological is assumed to be, is like, okay, concrete bad, not ecological. Yeah, steel bad, not ecological. Fair enough. Whatever the knowledge bank that a material surrounds itself with is why we are saying that today. Okay, so I'm not saying that concrete is sustainable, like ecological. Sustainable is a very bad word. I hate it. But ecological, I think, is a better term. No? So maybe concrete is not ecological, but that is understood only in today's context and in today's understanding of, one, the society, the culture, what is happening in around us in terms of like various events and acts. That is what the composition of today is. So then when we look at architecture, it is also the same. When we look at something in a certain period of time, it'll be a great composition for that period, should go away when the period changes, the time changes. The longer it stays, the longer it is able to take care of those changes of the composition around it. The longer it stays, it's more ecological at the end of the day.
Borrowing
But
from
yeah, anyway.
your conversation about ecology and time frame of a material, let's delve on Factory 5.0, because that is what brought me talking with you, to be honest. It's a great metaphor, like personally for me, to see how worms just on styrofoam forming their own, kind of composition becomes uh, a metaphor for the future, really, right? Um,
Hmm.
and the involvement, like just the entire production of yours, is quite fascinating because it's real, it's live. Even the people who go inside out, the type of light that falls in, it makes a lot of difference. What I didn't get though is that okay, it's a metaphor for the future, what was your intention through, like, what was your added intention of the entire installation? Is it like a speculative look into the future, or there is something added to the bit?
Hmm. Okay, so I'll tell you. Um, I'm a very stuck on guy, right? Like I like something, I'll keep liking it for a very long time. So very boring in that sense, right? So if I go to a coffee shop, if I like a certain, I mean a cafe, if I like a certain beverage, I'll order it through my lifetime, right? I'm that boring of a human. So I enjoyed Mills. I studied Mills these during the fifth year of my architecture, right? So basically, I mean, for my master, like bachelor's thesis, it was on Shakti Mills, and I was trying to understand, say, the relationship to the city that a mill has. Shakti Mills itself had an illicit or set of events that had organized themselves within, and I think it brought it down to the idea of identity. Somehow that project, as I said, right, like I only learned architecture in the fifth year. The project design was horrible. I mean, it was not horrible, it was great, but it was horrible in retrospection. um, but the learning of it continued to stay through my masters as well. And I think even after my masters, as I practice now, I think it is extremely important to keep having the conversation towards the production of the city, right? For as far the city of Bombay is concerned, the city was produced because of the mills, right? So it was produced in the sense of it brought in a lot of migration from down south, which is the Konkan belt. It added infrastructure around the city to be able to cater to just the production requirements of during the mills. After the mills, what really happened is a centralized industrial zone started disintegrating throughout to up north and towards this like towards the east, and that started increasing the footprint of Bombay itself, right? So some, like I mean, including the peri-urban and the hinterlands of Bombay. So um, I think the expansion, the city of its current stature, whatever it is today, is only because of the mills and the industrial revolution. What I wanted to talk about is when we are producing. I mean, I'm young, believe it or not. I'm pretty young. So I think there's there's a leverage that a young architect can, what a old architect cannot. Yeah. So I'm using that leverage of age where I think I can bring in harsh contradictions as a way towards position a debate or a conversation around the production of a city through a radical way, right? Now, so what I was trying to do, so this factory 5.0, right? This was an exhibition. This was situated in the Great Eastern Mills. The mills themselves started what were established in 1839. Yeah, 1839. So okay, I also this okay this happened in 1839, right? The same year there was another form of matter that was also designed, right? And that material was something that revolutionized mankind. Okay. um, it was plastics, right? So vulcanization of natural rubber was established around 1839s, 1840s, right? And honestly, I wouldn't have cared less, right? I mean, I wouldn't have known primary. But my fascination of the mills and the idea to produce, bring in the conversation of the production of the city, I was looking at two elements. One was space, which were the mill space. That is why the art gallery was. I mean, I chose an art gallery which was the mill in its earlier days. And then the second was material. So while I was searching and researching about the material, I landed up on this, right? So 1839 vulcanization of natural rubber was brought into process that led to forming a stable form of plastics eventually, right? What was interesting is that both the space and the both space and matter were were the product of the first industrial revolution. What I wanted to also talk about was the future, right? Like how we project in the future. So the fifth industrial revolution is where we enter into, right? Fifth industrial revolution is where we start collaborating with other forms of intelligence. So in some case, you are collaborating other forms of intelligence which are non-human, primarily, right? So, I mean, in some cases, we already do that through, say, these machine learning models, these, I mean, AI generative models, right? And I think somehow we are collaborating with that form of intelligence, and we are not like using it as a tool, right? And I think that that changes the entire approach. So in this case, I was trying to collaborate with other form of intelligence to produce something. Now, okay, an art gallery. I'm an architect. I don't usually make art and like put it up in the galleries, right? That is not something that I generally do. So if as an architect I'm supposed to do that, I have to be contextually relevant, right? So I mean, I need artwork that has been designed in the place, not designed, actually made, crafted in the place, right? So how do I do that? So then obviously this, I mean, the way I'm saying it is very streamlined, but trust me, the process was very like, hey, why no, I was all over the place, and then obviously, but
Specifically with the worms, man. How did you manage so many worms?
I got them from a farm.
Uh-huh.
So basically, what had happened is that um, s- the I landed up on this research, which was actually an accident by this Italian biologist who was cleaning her beehive as a daily thing. And a daily thing, as in, I mean, I don't know what the thing was, but then she was cleaning her beehive. She finds these three invertebrates, three, four. I mean, she usually finds them dead, right? So she would put them in a plastic bag to only decompose them later. No, she takes them, puts them in the plastic bag in the same way, puts it in a container and keeps it so that she'll decompose it later. After some time, she comes back and she sees that there were holes in the plastic bag. And I thought that was very interesting because I mean, even she thinks that it was very interesting, right? And she lands up researching more with the dealers. They landed up finding that in the mouths of certain worms, there are these certain bacteria which tend to melt plastic in a way of decomposition, right? And there is, so I mean, those were wax worms because they were in a beehive, right? I was like, oh man, this is damn cool, right? So what can I do? Can I find these worms? So I started like looking for these worms. Wax worms were extremely tough to procure. They weren't local, and somehow that entire math was just not falling in place, right? All the dots were not connecting with the wax worms. So I just called this farm who was selling these dead worms for as fodder, no, for chickens or for fishes, right? And I asked them how I could do this. what all kind of worms. So they send me like three kinds, each in, I remember, 50 worms each. And I started experimenting with those with blocks. But at the same time, I also started finding so much of the study that was already done around say styrofoam, around different forms of plastic, right? And what I mean, it was such a loophole, no? Uh, that it was like a black hole that I was just like circling. I'm just thinking about that, in a way. So I mean, any research technically lands up being like this, but then I got these worms. Some were reacting. So there were like three variants. Each variant was responding in a different way. Then luckily there was this one worm which was big enough, as big as this finger, who which which would make distinguishable apertures within. And then I thought this was damn cool, right? But it did not stop there, right? So if I would put a styrofoam, I would put a set of king worms. They would just eat it up, because they would be hungry, because I mean everyone is hungry. But then it wasn't fun, right? I mean, I was not doing anything as an architect. So then I started working with those guys to train them in a certain way, right? Because at that same time, I was also training my cat. I was also training my cat to play with a certain ball. So I thought, what if I could train my worms also? So I started working with a certain pigments, a certain ingredients for to understand what they like, what they don't like. I started, so they hate light, so they would respond to light. They would respond to certain micro behaviors. They would respond to immense heat. They would respond to low temperatures. They would respond to my movements, right? And these patterns is what I started curating it within. So what I started understanding eventually is that if I organize certain incentives around a piece of styrofoam, they will start consuming it only in a certain region or a certain area, right? And by doing so, I can define certain boundaries within which they'll consume these plastic pieces. So now, I mean, I have a piece right here, which is actually a cast in brass at the end of the day. But you'll see that there's this very distinctive outline, right? So this was, I mean, it's not that they've not eaten here, they have, right? But this is the is the possibility that I could achieve. So there's more aperture here. So now if I want to create a window, you know exactly how to organize behaviors in a way to, create like a create any sort of opening. And I thought that was the gesture towards creating architecture, right? So the first, I mean, remember, like as we were talking about a stone not being space, the first thing you had to do to create space is to create an opening. So for you to be able to enter. So now this was my way of creating space. Um, and then in some cases, obviously, time is also a parameter. So I mean, they're so sensitive, man. I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. First, the exhibition was opening on the 4th of October. I had packaged. I mean, I had to deal with the worms myself because all my vendors were like, "साहब, हम उसको हाथ नहीं लगाएगा." ना तो वो I had to do it myself. Luckily, I found this one guy from Assam who's used to consuming silkworms. He was like, "Oh, I can do this." So he and we packaged all the worms in each of the boxes. Um, so we, I remember we put them down by the end of 30th of September or something like that. And first 2 days of October were extremely hot. Yeah, just because of the heat, these guys ended up consuming so much of the styrofoam, and there were like 210 panels. So for us to package all of them, it took us like 2 days, right? and they were all custom boxes. It was all nuts, to be honest. But it took us some time, and just because of that heat of the first 2 days, they consumed so much more than we expected, right? And everyone around me, so the gallery was not used to such a thing. They're like, do one thing, just get done by the 25th of September, so at least 1 week down, 4th of October, when people are actually going to come, at least उनको दिखेगा तू जो बोल रहा है, right? That was that was the thing, because no one, it was an experiment, right? No one knows if it'll work or not work. But that consumes a lot more than expected, and I think just because of that, we were excited, right? We were like, okay, fine, it's working. First day, everything goes perfectly fine. It's the galleries, obviously, there's air conditioning happening. It's cooler than the first few days of October outside, right? Second day, I am extremely tired, so I go in late for the exhibition. No worms were up, nothing had changed, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on? And I'm worried because it's just the second day, and there's like an entire month to go down, right? I'm just like, now what to do? I spent some time, and then just towards the end, right? Like, towards the evening, I was like, I think it's too cold. Yeah, so I did not mention anything. I just started driving back home, and on my way, I just called the gallery curator. I think, did you increase the temperatures by from 20 to 26? Um, and next day they were all up just because of the temperature, right? So things like these. So there were a lot of behaviors that had to be taken care of, and the process actually landed up being this research that landed up translating into me using the worms, playing with them. I mean, I had like 10,000 worms in my space, and then I have had like all mishaps that possibly could go wrong. And then, I mean, literally everything that goes has to go wrong will go wrong before that day, no. So yeah, it all did, but it was fun. And all of the styrofoams actually got, they were eaten away in the first 15 days. So 15th of October, not in first 15 days, what, 10, 11 days. Then we had to change the entire set of 210 panels with new styrofoam because the exhibition had to continue till the end of the month. So stuff like this. So this is how the exhibition was. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so next question.
Hmm.
We have gone through Factory 5.2, right? You talked
Hmm.
about the next industrial revolution. You talked about another form of intelligence, which basically works along with us defining the parameters for it to work along to create form, and that was your expression of how it could be. Um, is there some way ahead that you must have thought about after this exhibition was over? We could use such intelligence in applications, maybe in architecture, maybe in form finding, maybe in urban design. I know one such application of Tokyo Metro, of how they had used algae and they had mapped out an entire,
It used a slime mold. A slime
yeah,
mold.
yeah, yeah, a slime board, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And through the behavioral pattern of how they carve out their shortest path to their food, the efficiency of the metro system was decided. So this
Hmm.
is one example we arrive at till now.
Hmm.
What do you look forward to in say next 10, 20 years, right? Another thing I would like to add is when you talk about intelligence, you also mentioned machine learning algorithm, and right now there is this huge discussion of general intelligence coming up, right? AGI. And AGI along with quantum computing is something that like we are never capable of becoming more intelligent than AGI could potentially be. How do you
Hmm.
see all of these things coming together and shaping our future?
I don't know how it'll be shaping our future, but I know one thing for sure, that um till the time you can think, you are somehow deploying intelligence, right? So say if you were to ask me how general intelligence was the full form of AGI, algorithmic general
Artificial general intelligence.
artificial general
Yeah.
intelligence. Okay. Okay. So, okay. One thing that I know for now is that most of the current forms of artificial intelligence is singular, right? It has then there is multimodality which is coming which is now being mass adopted through various forms of intelligence. What is necessarily happening is you are good at a certain task to only be able to start thinking of two things simultaneously for it to be called multimodal, right? If I were to talk about general intelligence, it I think it is also more or less like humans, right? I mean, if I think I'm also digressing with this question, but I'll tell you what. So there's a saying, right, where they say ki you need to be extremely specialized. So you need to be a master of one thing.
Jack of all trades,
Oh
master
yeah.
of
Jack of
none.
all trades. Yeah, 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 yeah. Great, great. How can we forget this? Anyway, but so see that is exactly the saying, right? Jack of all trades, but a master of none. Yeah. This is pretty much the opposite with which artificial intelligence has been, right? It's been a master of one to then become a jack of all trades, right? And that is the direction that it's going into. But you know what the complete saying is? The complete saying is jack of all trades is a must. Is How can I keep forgetting this? Jack of
That
all
one?
trades. That one you want to help us here?
Yeah. What is it? Wait, let me Google
Jack of all trades, master of none. I think it
Master
like
of none, right?
none. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
it.
Okay.
Wait.
I'm trying
Oh
to
yeah, it's
elaborate
a
on the
jack of
phrase.
all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one.
So that's the full thing, right? And exactly how general intelligence is progressing. So if you think about it, it started with like one task to then only be better at two tasks and then three, and then somehow combine logics and dimensions from all different ways of doing stuff to be a general intelligence, to be more holistic. That is exactly what we do as architects. Okay. Now, now coming back to your question, how do you see it shaping the future?
Okay, I'll just add one perspective to this. Okay,
Hmm.
you remember how we talked about different blacks and whites coming together and forming an image together, right? And
Hmm.
those blacks and whites being independent decisions that basically frame out a beautiful picture at the end of the day. Now, these decisions initially were human made, right? With the advent of AGI, aren't this composition is going to be much faster to take place, right? These independent blacks and whites will not be necessarily dependent on only one type of intelligence. They'll be they'll be exponentially catalyzed. So, how do you deal with it? What does that bring us to?
It brings us higher resolution. I mean, all it does is just brings us higher resolution, and I don't think that is a problem. I think it's actually extremely welcomed, because what? Okay, I'll tell you what happens. Um, if this technology did not exist, yeah, I mean, just like let's go back a few years, and this technology did not exist. I'm sure as architects, when we start understanding, or not as architects, as students of architecture, when we start with the professional college, right? Uh, we are told to like analyze the site, read the place. We don't even know what reading or analyzing is, but then we are taught how to do certain things, right? That itself is learning. So you learn about the place, which if I were to now put it in algorithmic terms is machine learning when the machine learns it. So you give machines a certain set of, say, readings for them to read out of, to then learn something, to extract certain patterns out of it, right? This is all machine learning is. Artificial intelligence is basically when the learnings actually help them to recreate the same object out of the machine learning, right? So our this is exactly how we would land up designing as options. Now the only difference is that your ability, not yours, but like say human ability to accelerate or multiply a certain sort of learnings, or the pool within which it can read or learn with a certain time span or with certain capacities, itself is a limitation, right? In this, the pool is the internet, right? So here you'll get, if you could produce like 10 iterations here or 20 iterations, here you can produce 20,000, right? So what has changed in is possibly the multiplicity of outputs, right? But somewhere what has also missed out from here to here is intuition, right? The ability to read is one, but the ability to craft out of reading it is another, right? And I think that is why the future is still great for the people who can think, because the people who can think will get 20,000 iterations, but then will craft out of all those learnings in a very specific way. So the resolution of the image is higher, so the nuances of reading a place will be higher, as far as I understand of it in today's times, right? Obviously I'm also limited by my perspectives, my directions, but this is more or less how I see it, is where if I can analyze, I mean, we've had like great architecture coming from um, the generation of Raj Rewal, Korea, B.V. Doshi. I mean, these three obviously, I mean, great architects. But even that generation generally, right? Like otherwise, we've had like great architecture coming, and maybe their tools were not as higher resolution as today's, right? Maybe they could not, but the learning, the patterns continue to remain the same. So if you read the site, maybe all you can do is you can use a you can use this one camera which allows you to like zoom into a certain point of view to a place where only you can see it, changes your perspective towards the outcomes, and that is all that will happen, right? So there are so many of these incidences where you visit a different country or you visit a different culture, you start understanding something new about the place, which only then influences you back, right? The same way. So it just brings in a different point of view in front of you. Same way, more iterations, more point of views to look at it from, and then the approach could be different. I mean, not necessarily the first whatever we've been doing is irrelevant, but maybe it's not that relevant again, right? Because the resolution is too low. So it's the same thing, right? During, like, when I was a kid, black and white images, TVs, I still remember, BPL was a thing. Black and white images, low resolution, I would see pixels every, I mean, I could see the pixels on the screen, right? Eventually today it is, I mean, they're like 8K monitors, and I think, I mean, we are on a completely different end of the spectrum. All that has changed is not what the photograph was, is how good the photograph looks, So maybe as I mean, if we were to like think of it in terms of the future in a very optimistic way, planet Earth will look nicer as a stratosphere of architecture. You know, that's pretty much it.
I
Yeah.
mean, fingers crossed it happens. Because again,
Yeah.
like, as you rightly said, the stratosphere is defined by the person and the power. So let's hope all three of these work together very well. Um,
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring, like, I just remembered this about
No,
intuition.
but but everything also accelerates,
Huh.
right? So
Yeah.
it's that is what if it's multiplying, everything accelerates. The good also does, the bad also does. Hence the grays become more prominent. So not necessarily it'll be good, but it'll also be extremely bad, and then it'll be nothing. So you don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something fun. At least that is what we can believe and go ahead with.
Yeah, I mean, that dichotomy has always existed, no? Good,
Yeah,
bad.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And it is
Agreed.
necessary to exist, I guess. Life will become so boring if both
Yeah,
of them are
certainly,
not together. I just
certainly.
remembered this quote from a person I used to work with. I used to work in architecture paradigm in Bangalore, and
Oh,
architect Sandeep Jain, I just asked him, "What is architecture for you?" And he was like, architecture is a skill of not choosing what is right, but rejecting what shouldn't be. So he was like that. It's the innate skill of rejecting things forms that collage of good things coming together, and that intuition is something that he thinks architecture is. And that perspective fit into our conversation makes a lot of sense, right? Uh,
it is no. It I think. See, I mean, to be very honest, it's also the way you frame it. Yeah,
yeah,
the construct of uh, how you communicate your ideas is one, right? So say I can say the glass is half empty, the glass is full. Is half full, right? Whatever. But I think um, every design process, right, regardless of it being architecture, it being product design, it being mm, any sort of fashion design, any sort of design making is choice making. You curation is choices. You organize with certain. So your vectors towards organization is dependent on what you're responding to, and design is always in response to something. Art might not necessarily be, right? And I think that is the difference, right? But not that design, aesthetics is also something that you need to respond to. So coming back to the previous conversation,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
everything needs to be beautiful,
yeah.
primarily. So it's just that what you consider beautiful, what I consider beautiful, could be
That is
different.
subject, right? That is the
Yeah,
fun in it, no?
yeah,
That difference in beauty.
yeah.
Okay, so like I was going through this pavilion designed by you, there's this in time, right? And it
Huh.
addresses a lot of climate change related ecological issues. It deals with a lot of energy consumption. So I'm assuming that you have deep dived into those sectors as well. And yesterday I was having a conversation with my friend of about how Donald Trump is back in the US and he has backed off from the Paris Convention and how it is going to be really bad for the ticking clock
Mm.
of how we are going to perish. And no matter how much we put in effort as individuals into curbing changes, this mere constitution of organized capitalism doesn't allow us to make a move. Add to that the institutional problems, the political will, the bureaucracy of India specifically of how it contributes its way. One thing that I don't look positively towards is climate change and its effects on human habitation, right? What is your perspective about it? Like, what should be, again, that is a wrong question to ask, but your views on what we are, where we are at, where we are headed towards, and what can we do to make it better?
Man, honestly, I think humanity. I mean, a human more or less is alive for 100 years. Yeah, or say 150 years. Yeah, 150 years in the sense where 50, like 25 years of knowledge is given to you by your parents. 25, I mean, like what happened in that 25 years and stuff like that. And I think intergenerational is how I'm calculating 150, right? But say in terms of knowledge bank or what gets propagated is so like 150 years of knowledge is actually extremely short term. It's so small on a scale of a planetary time scale that you are literally nothing. So what we might think is great today might not be great tomorrow. So and honestly capitalism is not that bad. Yeah, I'll tell you what is the problem. Okay, I can't be so constructive about it because even I don't know what the problem is. But I know one thing for sure is that if capitalism was I mean, 100 years back or 200 years back, the lives of people on the planet were very different to what we live our lives as today, right? And that has only been possible because of capitalism. Yeah, capitalism has actually increased our standards of living, standards of how we experience the world generally, right? I agree. When we say capitalism, we are actually hinting at a very few um, monolithic uh, companies, right? Which have sort of manipulated and folded and crafted scenarios around them in a way to benefit themselves, in a way to see it only as a number. But not all. I mean, there are so many organizations that work within the capitalistic economic framework who even actually are good enough, right? They do better. But it's, I think it's just the way. So if say capitalism were just a set of tools within which we operate, we can actually tweak it in a good way to make a positive change, right? But the organization of that change is what is missing. So I mean, I was discussing this with another guy a few weeks back, is that we need a master plan for what the change needs to be, right? And I think I might not have a definitive answer on what good or bad is for the future, but a master plan is just a set of decisions you'll make for a few years, and if we achieve that, the goal is then to achieve that, right? And yeah, I mean, it's the entire planet is so big. What consensus you come down to really matters regardless if it's the global south or if it's the global north, because it continues to exist or it continues to die together as a planet. mm, yeah, and I think what we fight about as countries and nations are pretty much fights that happen in these local markets between two banias, where they'll be fighting over some some change of cash or something like that, right? So it's just a scaled up proportionate fight on a global scale. It's pretty much that. Now Trump coming out pulling US out of the Paris Agreement or say the World Health Organization is during the presidency, during his presidency, right? I mean, the minute it changes, you never know. Does it change? Does it give us a small setback? Maybe it does, but I still don't know, very honestly, on how it sets it back. maybe they want to dig a few. I mean, they want to explore oil down Texas, and I think that is why they wanted to pull out for the time being. Once they have enough oil out, they'll come back into the agreement, and I think it's positive.
And that is all for our chat today. If you enjoyed this conversation, do subscribe to us on Spotify and follow on Instagram for updates. Thank you for listening.